Hello and welcome along to this week's Factory Talk. Now this week we're going to be taking the health of the British manufacturing sector. Politically, economically and indeed medically, the country has faced and is facing challenges like never before. So where are we now and where is UK PLC heading? Well, to find out, we're joined by Stephen Phipson from Make UK. Stephen, it's good to talk to you, it really is. So first of all, just tell us a bit about Make UK.
Oh, right. So Make UK is one of the oldest membership organisations in the country and one of the large national bodies. We've been around 125 years, always involved in the manufacturing sector and representing across the whole piece, basically, all the subsectors in manufacturing across the country. We've got a membership of we represent around 22,000 manufacturing businesses, and they cover about 1 million of the employees in the country out of the 2.7 million people that are employed in the manufacturing sector. And we do a range of different things for our members. We have a large HR legal practice where we advise on HR matters to do with manufacturing. We're one of the largest apprentice trainers in the country. So we have a largest actually up in Birmingham apprentice training centres where we're training up to 2,000 apprenticeships in all the latest technologies in manufacturing. We do a range of other training from health and safety and those sorts of things to support our manufacturers. And of course, we also have a strong policy group where we seek to influence government policy to make sure of the best outcomes for the manufacturing sector.
Right, well, good luck with that one. Now, we're talking to you at the time when you've just released your annual manufacturing report. Before we look at the findings, just tell us how you've compiled all the information that it contains.
Right, so we compile this information through regular surveys of thousands of manufacturers. We also have a structure of regional advisory boards around the country where we take the temperature on a regular basis of many of those companies. So it's a really good cross-section of opinion across all the subsectors in manufacturing in the UK.
Right, now let's look at the report. Just before we get too much into it, this I understand covers the period really prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, it does. It takes us just into the beginning of it, but it really is a snapshot looking at the previous year's performance. So it's really just before the pandemic really started to bite.
So in broad brush terms then, what do you think it tells us about the state of manufacturing in the UK up to then? And if you can sort of perhaps talk about where you think we are now in the second half of 2020.
Sure. So it was showing good progress. It was showing just how important the manufacturing sector is to the UK economy. It talks about the scale of manufacturing, the fact that we are the 9th largest in the world in terms of manufacturing output. It shows the contribution to exports of the country, showing that although manufacturing is reported largely by government of being around 10 to 12% of GDP, we actually are responsible for 53% of the exports of the country. So an enormous economic benefit to the UK in terms of having a strong manufacturing piece. It also talks about our strength in certain subsectors, how strong we are in things like, or have been in commercial aviation, the importance of the automotive sector, but also a lot of really important new innovative areas of manufacturing, and particularly around, and we can come on to this, things like digital manufacturing and robotics. So a really important place in the UK economy.
Yeah, those stats, just let it hit home for a minute. Half of our exports are manufacturing based. We're always hearing we're a service based economy, but half of the UK's exports are from manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a really important point because if we put it in perspective, 53% of the exports are manufacturing and only 47% are services. So although services make up a large proportion of the domestic economy, around 80% or so, in terms of exporting, which is really the future in terms of our new place in the world going forwards, manufacturing has got the leading role.
Right, let's focus on some of the positives that we've touched about briefly, and some of the things we talk about on this programme. You mentioned at the start of the interview that Make UK is very keen on apprenticeships. You talk in the report about training, about R&D. I mean, the report's got a lot to say about R&D. If we take all that as one big lump, if you like, R&D, training, apprenticeships, what are you finding about that?
Well, R&D investment, of course, is the key to innovation, and there's a lot of support from governments around that through UKRI and lots of the initiatives there. It's seen as absolutely critical to maintain, not only maintain our position, but be very successful on the export agenda. And if we look at R&D, in terms of business R&D for the country, 66% of R&D spend is by manufacturing companies. So again, it's that investment in the future that's really important. And if we just break that down to two key sectors, again, going back to aerospace, where we are a leader in the world, and automotive, which is very significant in the UK, then between those two sectors, we invested £5.9 billion in R&D for the future. So really important there in terms of the future economic state of the country, that R&D level is maintained. It keeps us at the cutting edge of innovation. And of course, that makes us competitive. So again, another really good sign that it's important. And I think another aspect of that is that it enables us to make a good pitch to attract that young talent into the sector, because it's really important that we're investing in the latest technologies. It makes it really interesting for youngsters to come in, because it's not the traditional view of manufacturing, which we always try to improve upon. It's not the traditional smoke-filled factory type environment anymore. It's very much about cutting-edge digital technologies, robotics, 3D printing, all those interesting technologies that we hear about constantly. And the R&D investment really does back that up, and that's recognised by governments, who are also contributing significantly to that innovation agenda. So we're very proud of that. It's a very, very strong hallmark of UK manufacturing.
I think the other thing worth mentioning when we're talking about attracting young people into manufacturing is when they get into manufacturing, the jobs continue to be among the better paying jobs as well.
Yes, the report highlights that. In fact, our average pay in the manufacturing sector is around £35,000 a year, and that's about 13% above the national average. So again, highly paid jobs, and of course you gain good skills, good strong vocational skills, or skills at degree level, which are cutting edge. So again, it makes it a very attractive place for youngsters to form their career. Absolutely.
One of the things as well I found particularly interesting, when we look at the UK itself, we talk about where industry manufacturing is based. There's always been this feeling that it's in the Midlands, it's up north. But that, according to the report, isn't exactly the case. Which parts of the country are contributing most?
Well, traditionally, the northwest of the UK is the heartland of manufacturing, followed very closely by the West Midlands, driven by the automotive sector. And that's been the case for many years. What is, I think, very interesting, if you look at the report, we've got a very good regional breakdown of where manufacturing is and where those jobs are around the country. And although that trend continues, if you were to take London and the South East together as a combined area, that just tips into the lead this time round. And that's driven by our growth in the electronics manufacturing sector. So quite an interesting change there happening. The Northwest is still, if you take it individually, the strongest area, but that London and the South East trend is very interesting, and we see lots of interesting, innovative electronics manufacturers in the South East now gaining a lot of traction. So that's the one change that's been quite interesting on a regional basis, I would say, from this report.
Is that also reflecting the change in, again, something you alluded to earlier, the type of manufacturing? It's not the big smoky, dirty factories of the past. It's digital technologies and it's green technologies, 3D printing. Is that part of the case too?
That is part of the case, certainly. I mean, there's a high predominance of the high technology type businesses in the southeast, but of course, more generally, even in the more traditional areas of manufacturing, we are seeing a rapid increase in the use of mechatronics or robotics, to use the term for that, and we are really pushing hard on the digital agenda. We do have a lot of our larger manufacturers now adopting very advanced digital techniques, and with the support of government. In fact, today there was the announcement of the £300 million of funding from government. I think it's 150 million from government and 150 million from business, really to help our smaller companies, our smaller manufacturers, adopt more of those digital techniques, part of the fourth industrial revolution, which I think is absolutely vital for the future of our sector.
You just beat me to it. I was going to bring up the fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things and everything. It's amazing the speed that everything is adapting or changing, isn't it?
It is. And I think one of the key messages, though, is that although we see some incredible advances, particularly with the larger organisations in the use of automation and the use of different virtual techniques and digital twins and all the other techniques that we've got around digital manufacturing there, it's worth noting that even for the very small companies, the use of very interesting new lost digital techniques. I mean, for less than £1,000, you can equip your CNC machine with a number of digital sensors, harvest the data, and we've shown that you can double your productivity within a month by doing those kinds of initiatives. And I think the scheme that was announced today, actually, by the government on Made Smarter is really about trying to get technology adoption out, not only around those large companies which are taking great advantage of it, but really the advantage we can see in those smaller companies in terms of adopting many of these techniques at a much lower cost level. We need to dispel the myth that it's only about enormous investments, that digital techniques can actually make a big difference in manufacturing, because it can make a very significant difference on the shop floor for very low cost. And it's that message that we need to get out more broadly around all the manufacturers in the UK.
Forgive me if I mention the B word, but Brexit remains a political hot potato. We're now around about 3 months until the end of the transition period. What does the report say about Brexit and about the effect it will have on UK exports to the rest of the EU?
So the important message and the discussions we are constantly having with government is that Europe as a whole, taken as a whole, is still by far our most important export partner. It accounts for nearly half of all of those exports that we were talking about from the manufacturing sector. Although we can see from the report that the single biggest country on its own is the US as an export destination. If we take together all the European nations, then that forms the largest part of our exports. And I think the real message here is that it's not just about exporting finished goods. The trade we have with the EU is about a highly integrated and very sophisticated supply chain arrangement where many products are going backwards and forwards across the borders, sometimes 10 or 12 times before they reach a finished stage. And that high level of integration has been vital in the growth of areas, particularly in things like the automotive sector and commercial aerospace, making sure that access to that free flow of goods backwards and forwards across the border is absolutely vital to the way that we have developed the manufacturing systems in this country over the last 25 years. And so we keep on making sure that government really understands the importance of that free flow of trade. And also it's important, it's not just about tariffs and customs and borders. That's really, really important. But there's a lot of supporting areas of cooperation that are vital that we have a good deal on as well. The free flow of service technicians backwards and forwards across the border, equivalents on things like the REACH regulations around the use of chemicals so that we are using the same processes in our manufacturing that are approved, a whole range of different issues there. And of course, in great detail, we've been making sure that our voice is heard in those negotiations so that people make sure that that's taken care of when eventually, after all of the posturing and negotiating tactics that we're seeing in the media, that we do end up with a deal that actually helps to continue that free flow trade with the EU, vitally important to our sector.
Right. Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, the trouble is, do you think government's listening? That there's a big, it's a rock meeting a hard place, isn't it? Business and politics. They're very they're intertwined, but sometimes they're looking for different things.
We get a lot of airtime. I speak very regularly to the business secretary. He's very receptive. He understands it. There's a lot of detailed evidence that's gone in. They do understand exactly how important it is to the sector to make sure we have a good deal with the EU. We have commitments right from the Prime Minister to say that even in this more tricky time of the negotiations, that the best outcome is a deal, because they recognise the importance to our sector in particular of making sure those arrangements in place. I haven't got a crystal ball, to be honest with you. I don't know where we're going to end up. My job is to make sure that we represent the best of manufacturing, to make sure that all the negotiators understand the importance of this, and to make sure that we get the best outcome from this possible. Of course, the manufacturing sector is very, very good at adapting, and we can adapt. We need time to adapt, but we can adapt. But I think the best outcome is to get, by far the best outcome, is to get a good deal with the EU to ensure trade continues.
There's a lot of world outside of the EU. What about trade deals around the globe and exports to some of the major markets? I think actually we've heard that a trade deal with Japan has now been concluded. Presumably you welcome that, but that's just the start, we would hope, of a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are absolutely the key supporter of free trade. I mean, that's manufacturing at its heart. And if you look at the statistics around where we do export to, manufacturing again punches above its weight in terms of its penetration into those markets. I think to a certain degree in terms of scale, proximity is very important to business, particularly when we're talking about integrated supply chains. So back to the point about Europe being very important, but we've made great progress in the US and in terms of our exports to the US. And remember, that's without a trade deal at the moment. We've seen a 19% increase in our exports there of high technology products from the UK. So we can do it, we're able to do it, and we welcome those trade deals to make sure we have free access to those markets. It tends to take quite a while to embed manufacturing products into other countries. We particularly have to work on partnerships with companies in those territories to make sure it happens. But freeing up access, making sure we've got free trade there, vitally important to growth in the future. But again, proximity in terms of the EU is important as well in terms of the scale of that business. So what we need is a good balance between the two.
I don't want to stray too far into politics, but you mentioned the United States. There's a small matter of a presidential election, in less than 2 months now. Do you think that might help or hinder efforts to get a trade deal?
I think in terms of our trade at the moment with the US, I think basically it's about the quality and the competitiveness of our products. And as I said, even without a trade deal, we are doing a significant amount of business with the US, and that continues to grow. So whatever flavour of politics we have, it's really, we do it on our merits, on the technical merits of the products and services that we're offering to the US. That's good. The chances of doing a trade deal, this is a political matter. It seems to change on a regular basis. But I do hope that and I've seen a lot of progress being made in the talks so far. I do hope we do reach a trade deal quickly because we'd like to see an acceleration of that growth with our partners in the US.
Finally, we're just about out of time, but tell me, are you optimistic then for UK manufacturing? As I said right at the start, I mean, I'm old, but I can't remember a time when there was so much going on as there is at the moment. Can you still remain optimistic for UK manufacturing looking forward?
Well, I think we're all of that age, basically. I've spent 40 years of my career in manufacturing. I've seen us go through ups and downs and different scenarios over the years. We've weathered the storm. We've transformed. It's a wonderfully adaptable sector. We have some great companies, really world-class technologies. I think we've got a brilliant opportunity to be world-class in terms of digital techniques, which are the future. And so I remain incredibly optimistic about our sector. We will weather the storms here. We'll get through these political difficulties and we'll go from strength to strength into the future. There's no doubt about that.
Stephen Phipson from Make UK, thank you very much indeed for your time today. And if you want to check back on any previous editions of Factory Talk, including Oliver North of Fire and Ambulance Manufacturer Venari and Nick English from Bremen Watchmakers, they're all available on MTDMFG. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.